wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll save memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll save memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. But time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Good evening, everybody. It's John here from Tutor to You, welcoming you along to another live stream clinic for a OCR A-level law. Good evening to anybody who is watching us live. If you are, it's a clinic, so the idea is that we're going to answer as many questions as we can over the next 25 minutes. So do feel free to pop your questions into the YouTube chat window as soon as you've got anything that's come across in your mind and you want us to answer here live. A very good evening to you if you are watching us live. Very good evening, of course, to Sarah and Emily who have joined me here. Sarah on the left hand side of the screen, Emily in the middle. Good evening to you both.
Hi, evening, John.
Good to see you both. Now then, as I said, it's a clinic, so the idea is that if anybody's got any questions for paper 3, that they stick them into the chat window and we'll try and answer those. Now, we've come to paper 3, obviously. I hope paper 2 went well for you. I hope paper 1 and paper 2 went well for you, and I hope you're getting your revision and your preparations good for next week's paper 3. So what we'll do is we'll spend a few minutes just at the beginning of this live stream going through one or two of the bits and bobs about paper 3 that you should be aware of, just to make sure that they're straight in our heads, and then we'll field any questions that have come in. Is that okay, guys? Can I hand over to you now?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm hoping that you find this session useful. I'm answering a very basic question. Do you need to answer all of the questions on the paper? The very short answer is no, please don't do that. And then, even though we don't negatively mark an OCR, you will lose time to be able to answer other questions. So you will lose marks in that sense. So we'll start off with section A, obviously. With section A being worth 25% of your marks, you're going to spend about 30 minutes on this. I'll come back to the timings in a moment, actually. With the nature of law section A, there will be 2 questions. Both of them will be worth 20 marks. These will be on the topics of law and morality, law and justice, law and society, and then there's the introductory stuff like law and rules, for example. You will get a choice of 2 questions. Do not answer them both. Read them both, decide which one you feel most comfortable with, and then obviously answer that one. I do recommend that you plan this one and make sure that you directly answer the question, which can be quite specific. Moving on to section B, this is obviously worth a huge chunk of your overall exam, 75 marks. So in terms of timing, you will spend the majority of your time on this one. You will choose either part A or part B. Part B will be on the next page, so make sure that you actually turn the page and have a read of part B and don't just read part A and think that you have to answer those ones. There will be 3 questions for part A and 3 questions for part B. You will answer all 3 questions on part A or part B, dependent on which one you've chosen. Sorry, I think it's actually part 1 or 2, not part A or B. The first 2 questions will be scenario based. So these will be 20 mark scenario questions. And then the third question will be the essay evaluation question. Now, regardless of whether you choose to answer part 1 or part 2 in section B, the evaluation question will stay the same. So that means you absolutely have to answer that question up at section, it's question 7 or 10. It will be the same on both sides. Your choice is about the scenario questions. So if we could move on to the timing on the next slide. Thanks, John. So for section A, you're going to spend 30 minutes in total, and for section B, you're going to spend 90 minutes in total. So the 30 minutes that you're going to spend on section A is going to include reading time and planning time. So 5 minutes for reading and planning if you need it. If you don't, you can just save it for section B. But I do recommend that you take the 5 minutes at least to read and plan that. For section B, you're going to be spending 90 minutes on this, but that is into 3 30s. So you're going to spend 30 minutes on every 20 mark question. Same as section A, really. 30 minutes on each scenario, 30 minutes on the evaluation. There is one more thing to mention in terms of timing for section B. You will have to read both scenarios and both sets of questions before you decide whether you're going to answer part 1 or part 2. So take that time into account. That might be your 5 minutes if you spend quite a long time reading both part 1 and part 2. So a quick tip is to not read the scenario, read the questions first, and that will save you a little bit of time. All right. Let's move on. Unless anybody has any questions about planning, timing, what questions to answer, etc., feel free to pop those into the chat. And I'll pass over to you, Sarah, if you're happy to go ahead with the next section.
Yeah, of course. So we've had some questions in previously, and one of the questions that we were sent in was, what is the best way to structure the 20 mark nature of law evaluation question? So it's slightly different on paper 3 compared to paper 1 and 2, where you have the section A very much an 8 mark knowledge question and then a separate 12 mark evaluation question. When we get to paper 3, we know that they come together essentially into one question. So you have a choice of 2 20 mark questions and you choose one. Whether you choose question 1 or question 2, you will essentially want the same approach, because you're wanting to try and get in that AO1 knowledge for the 8 marks out of the 20 and the evaluation 12 marks out of the 20. One way to do this is to split it up so that you've got the chunking method where you've got all your AO1 first. So you're essentially trying to show the examiner that you can gain the 8 marks from your introduction of your essay, and then moving on to evaluation and analysis for those 12 marks, where similar to the other evaluation questions on section B, you aim to sort of get 4 to 5 well-developed paragraphs to cover that topic. So it depends on the question. As Emily's already said, you can have justice, morals, society, or the introductory nature of law topics like the rule of law. So the best approach, as shown on screen there, is to start with a definition. So if it's asking for justice, to define what justice is and also what law is, and then before you kind of come into the relationship between the two. Similar with morals, start off with what a moral is or what morals are, what law is, and again, the relationship between the two, the distinctions between the two, how the two are enforced, etc. Give some examples. As part of the mark scheme, the examiners are looking for a wide range of examples from your whole course of study. So these questions tie in really nicely everything that you've studied so far. So try and aim for some criminal law, some tort law, and if depending on your option, human rights, contract, etc. Trying to bring in those wide topics to back up your theory. So give you points. You do need theory. It is a theory-based question, this, so you do need theory in there. Again, aiming for a range of theory. If you try and get some theorists to support each theory, then that's a strong approach. And then I would advise to end with the analysis to make it really clear that you've got the two. It is fine to interleave, and your analysis can be interwoven in the main body of your evaluation. But I do find it a little bit easier to do that separately. So I usually advise to my students to do that towards the end. Analysing and evaluating the point in a similar way to what you would answer a Section B evaluation, and again, aiming for those well-developed paragraphs. Ultimately, the key thing with an evaluation is to address the question, whatever slant the question has put on, for is it saying that morals do influence the law, or the law does influence people's morals, making sure you really answer that question. Often, if we learn kind of evaluation points, or we learn parts of the theory and can't really apply it to the question, that's really weak evaluation. So we want to be able to answer that question. Remember to include a conclusion. Again, ultimately, you are answering that question that you're given. Do we want to do the next slide, or is there any questions? So a previous question again that's been sent in, how do or should I write my answer to scenario questions to gain full marks? So this is sort of the same question as what I've just done for an evaluation, but looking this time at an application question. So again, a 20-mark question on Section B is made up of 20 marks, but the skills required for those 20 marks are essentially split in the same way to that evaluation question. So you've got your 8 marks of knowledge again, and then you've got 12 marks, but this time for application. And when we look at how that relates, again, I would say to set them out separately. Again, I would do the chunking or the blocked approach, where depending on what the question is asking for, you put all your AO1 knowledge about that question first. So if it was a human rights question on Article 5, for instance, you write about the article and the relevant subsections within the article, and then your application separately, your 12-mark application separate to that. Again, you can interweave it, but it is better to block it, in my opinion. When we're looking at the AO1 knowledge, we're looking for definitions, explanations, and cases, aiming for a range of cases to support the topic. And when we're looking at application, we're looking at applying that law, whatever you've wrote in your AO1, to the scenario facts, advising it as appropriate to the scenario, so only including what's relevant to that person or people in the question, and ultimately, again, conclude the question, reach a verdict or an outcome for whether that human right, for instance, has been breached. Okay, I think there's a question in the chat, John. How many paragraphs do we need for a nature of law question? So again, a good question. There's not really a set length. It's more about achieving those marks. So if you're talking about your AO1 paragraphs there, it doesn't need to be overly detailed. I normally say you've got about 10 minutes to write your AO1 in a question. So what you can write in 10 minutes is realistic. And again, trying to get into account the definitions, the theories, the types, how it links to the course in terms of the AO1. Similar when you're doing the second part of your answer, I normally advise to my students about 15 minutes for evaluation. So again, it's what you can write in 15 minutes. I would be advising 4 to 5 well-developed paragraphs that relate to the question. And I think we've got another question.
Sure you always conclude at the end.
Of course, yeah, as Emily said, very important. Do you want to take this one, Emily?
Yeah, sorry. Was reading the question and completely ignored you there. Yes. So what I would advise is we haven't obviously got any resources right now to provide you, but Tutor2U's website have a phenomenal amount of resources, and they actually have previous revision live streams that you can have a look at. You can also download the PowerPoints that have been used. And in addition to that, there are just tons and tons of quizzes and flashcards and like notes, recordings, that type of thing that you can find on Tutor2U's website that can help you with the essay. And
There's another question from Aisha. I have seen that you have to pay for them, zero, especially for human rights. Oh, is that about the resources? There is a human resource booklet due out. Unfortunately, it's just not been out in time for this exam series. So really sorry, Aisha, but there is one due to come out. And we are constantly building. The paper 3 is probably the hardest one to have subject-specific resources on because, of course, there's lots of options. There's various options in terms of contract and human rights. So it is building, but yeah, an area that we need a few more in maybe. Thank you for the feedback.
yeah, it's always the area that requires more resources, more input. I think we've just got fewer staff that are willing to create resources for them, unfortunately. But I will say there are some free resources. Obviously, the ones that you pay for are going to be the revision guides and things like that. But if you don't go onto shop when you go onto the Tutor2U website, go onto resources, and I believe that you have to specifically click on revision live streams, or is it called something else, Sarah?
Yeah, that's correct. Or you can just go to tutor2u.net/live and all the live streams come up. You can filter by subject. So obviously filter into law for this particular subject. And there's lots and lots. We did a series of human rights videos last year, actually. So they're still very relevant. So you can just find them in the drop-down menu.
Okay, next question. Do you know, from Aisha, do you know what can come up on the essay question for paper 3, human rights and nature of law? So if we start with section A, nature of law, for nature of law, it's going to be a question on either the introductory content, law and morals, law and justice, or law and society. It will absolutely be on one of those. We can't make predictions about that. And then in human rights law, for the essay question, it's going to be on the Human Rights Act itself, any of the articles of the convention, so that's 5, 6, 8, 10, and 11. And I believe that's it. That's all you can get asked to evaluate. Yeah.
Yep, correct. Yeah. There's a question from Jacinda. Oh, sorry, Emily.
That's okay, go ahead.
Could there be a pure domestic law question, or will it be paired with an article? So you can get questions on pure domestic law as well as the articles. Typically what we see with OCR is usually they do put an article question first. So for instance, in question 3, and then they will usually pair it with a domestic law question that's within that area. There's no specific rule saying they have to do that. That's just the kind of pattern that we've seen in the past. So last year it was Article 5, for instance, and then it was paired with a police powers domestic law question for a separate 20 marker. And then I think this flip side was Article 10 and then paired with obscenity and defamation. So we have seen those questions come up in that way, where you get sort of a 20 marker for the article, a 20 marker for something domestic law related. There'd be nothing stopping the exam just putting 2 20 markers on the domestic law and not pairing it with an article and vice versa. So yeah, be prepared for kind of any, within your topics, any of those 20 mark questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's any more questions, I think my chat's just loading, but if there's any more questions, do please pop them in, and me and Emily will aim to answer them the best we can.
If there aren't any questions, do you want to move forward with the PowerPoint? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. You happy for me to take this one, Sarah?
Of course, yeah.
Fab. So how can the restrictions come up in the scenario? So as Sarah mentioned, what OCR seem to be doing is pairing an article with a restriction, or a domestic law. So what you might find is on part 1 of section B, you might get one article, and then what the second scenario question could be a restriction, and then you'll get the same thing on part 2, so another article with another restriction. For example, Article 5 with police powers, Article 8 with interception of communications. Now, interception of communications, I don't believe has been on since prior to 2019. So we don't like to make predictions, but interception of communications is one of the more likely ones to come up, shall we say. And then Article 5, I believe, is the one that hasn't been on as an evaluation question yet. So that's worth noting. But do bear in mind, any of those could come up as evaluation. 8, 10, 11, and then the Human Rights Act as well. But in terms of the scenarios, you could get a scenario on any of the articles enforcing human rights, and then any of the restrictions as well. Now, in theory, they could pair these together as well. So they could pair Article 5 with police powers in the same question, or they could separate the questions and make a full 20 marker on Article 5, and then a full 20 marker on restrictions relating to Article 5, for example, police powers. It's very important that you understand which restrictions go with which articles. So, for instance, police powers goes with Article 5, interception of communications goes with Article 8, etc. I'm just going to pause there because I've noticed a couple of questions coming through. Where do I look for human rights resources on the Tutor2U website? So, Isha, if you go onto the Tutor2U website and click resources, you can find them through that. Or, like Sarah said, there's an actual direct link that you can post into the URL. What was that link, Sarah?
It's the usual Tutor2U website, so it's www.tutor2u.net, and then it's the /live. There isn't many human rights resources on the website, so it might be that you are looking in the right place, but you can't find many just yet. As I say, the live streams from last year for the human rights ones are definitely worth a watch. We've got the odd blog, but again, unfortunately, there's no study book or anything for it just yet. There's also a question from Ollie. Yeah. Is judicial review under enforcement? Yes, it is, Ollie. So it's about how you can take your case to a court. So judicial review forms part of that topic under the enforcement. And again, you can get a 20-mark scenario question on that.
I think judicial review was on in 2023, I want to say. But domestic courts and the European Court of Human Rights haven't been on. Well, all three of those are under enforcement. Okay. Do you want to head
any
back
more
to the
previous questions, John?
We've done all the questions so far.
We'll finish on the game, unless there's any more questions that are in the chat. If you do have a question, pop it in and we will pause the game and we can answer your questions as and when they come in. So we've got a true and false game. There is a question from Aisha. As an examiner, do you know when a student does not fully know what they are talking about? Yes, is
Yes.
the answer to that.
Yes.
Yes. I think law is one of those subjects that it's very clear if you're kind of waffling about. You do need those correct definitions. And whilst, of course, we give you the benefit of the doubt and we'll mark positively for what we can see in that response, it is one of those topics where you need to memorise the definitions and add case law in to support that. So I think it's a very hard one to just talk about generally without knowing the specific knowledge. I think Emily would probably agree.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But it's worth mentioning that we do positive marking. It's not negative marking. So we are looking to award points. We don't notice that you've said something wrong and take points away from you. That's not how it works. We'll read the entire answer. We'll decide on a level for it. So level 1, 2, 3, or 4, with 4 being the best. And then we'll decide where to place you in that level. So it's not like, oh, you've said this equals 2 marks. Oh, but then you've said that wrong. I'm going to take those 2 marks off you. It's not like that at all. So almost including incorrect content, you are better off writing something than nothing because we positively mark. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. And just thinking as well, Aisha, because you've mentioned resources, at this point, I would say go to the mark schemes as well. The mark schemes are really informative. You can get them on online, free. You can get all of the mark schemes up until 2023. The 2024 mark schemes are still secure for teacher access only, but I would really recommend, if you kind of want in a nice guide, a sort of summary of what's required for that topic, the mark schemes are great. You may have already used them and visited them, but if you haven't, there's quite a good website called Revision World that has them all on. My students tend to use that. You have the question paper and the mark scheme, so they're great to visit for a little bit of a summary too. And yes, you absolutely can still reach the top mark band if you say something's wrong. As Emily said, we just ignore and discard anything that's wrong or incorrect, and we just positively mark what is there. And so, half of your answer could be wrong, but the other half of the answer is right. And again, we would positively mark for what we can see and how it's applied to the scenario or evaluated. So please don't worry if you do write something incorrect or wrong. Obviously, you could cross it out if you realised in the exam, but if it's there, we'll just ignore it or not give any credit to that part. But best of luck as well, of course, for the exam. I hope the other two have been going well. Mark schemes are a great tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll take some of the game questions or points. This is a question that I get asked quite a lot. Do you need to include section numbers and Acts of Parliament years? Because, of course, you don't need the year for cases. We just expect a name, or actually expect to be able to identify what the case is that you're talking about and linking that to the law. Whereas for Acts of Parliament, yes, preferably you do know the date. And that's because often we have the case where there's several of that Act of Parliament with the same name. So preferably you do put the date in. Similar with section numbers, and section numbers can count as legal authority. So if you're a little bit down on your cases, but you do have section numbers for Acts of Parliament, or similar for this paper with articles, and article subsection counts in the same way, it counts as legal authority. So yes, that's true. Next question, John.
Oh, can I take this one, Sarah? I'm hoping that people listened at the beginning. True or false, you need to answer all of the questions. Can we get true or false into the chat, please? Very interested to see if people know the answer to this based on what we spoke about at the beginning of the session. So true or false in the chat if you think you know the answer. Do you need to answer all of the questions? Okay, let's see what the correct answer is. Yes, not true or false. Well done. Please don't do that. As I said at the beginning, you will waste time. You don't have to answer all of the questions. You answer one from part A, and then you answer 3 from part B, but only from part 1 or 2, depending on which scenario you choose to answer. Thank you. Let's go on to the next one.
You must
Sarah, do you want to do
include
this?
Yes, you must include case facts and dates when referring to case law. As Emily just said, I hope people were listening when I gave the little introduction. Again, feel free to pop your answer into the chat and play along. What do we think to that one?
Oh dear, Isha. Yes, that for some reason that happens once in every year group. Somebody does it.
Somebody also does one from each side. And as Emily said, you have to commit to a side on section B, a part A or a part B. Don't pick and choose. No pick and mix.
Mm-hmm.
So that, of course, is false. We don't need case facts. Sometimes if it's quite similar to the scenario, it might be worthwhile putting that in to show that you recognise that's similar to a legal authority. But you actually don't need the facts. It's the principles, it's the outcomes, the ratios that are markable, that is the authority. And as I already mentioned, dates are not important with cases. Next question.
Okay, true or false? I hope we know the answer to this. Paper 3 is on Tuesday, the 10th of June, in the morning. In the morning. So true or false? Pop your answer in the chat quickly. Okay, got a few through. Just give a few more moments for everybody else. So paper 3 is on Tuesday, the 10th of June, AM. So in the morning. Okay, let's see if you were correct. Everybody said true so far. Well done, that is true. Please do not sleep in. it is in the morning. It will start, depending on your centre, 9 a.m, 9:15, or thereabouts. So yes, glad that people knew the answer to that one. That would have been a rude awakening if not.
Yes. What a great question to finish with. And just let's make sure everybody knows the exact time and where they need to be on Tuesday morning. Brilliant stuff. Thank you. Listen, we've come to the end of this live stream, come to the end of our live streams for A-level law for this academic year as well. I hope if you've been watching previous ones, you've found them useful. You have one more exam to go, which is next Tuesday, 10th of June, first thing in the morning. So from Sarah, from Emily and myself, obviously we wish you the very best of luck. Can I just say a big thank you to everybody who's put their questions to us tonight? They've all been really, really useful. Can I say another massive thank you, of course, to Sarah and Emily for answering those questions. We have come to the end. As I said before, from Sarah, from Emily, from myself, from everybody at Tutor You, the very best of luck. And we hope to see you again at some point in the near future. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.